everybody. Hi, Sandy. So I'm going to read you the whole book. It'll take about 3 days. No, I'm going to, my favorite part of getting up in front of fellow human beings, I love that Q&A part. I love that conversation after, if you want. You don't have to. But I'm a teacher, so I could call on people. I'm going to just read maybe about 9.5, 10 minutes from this new novel, and then I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how I came to write this one. And then let's have a conversation if you're up for it. And let's see now. What do I need to tell you? So it's the only novel I've ever written from just one point of view. One of the many things I love about the novel form is that it can cover centuries and cities, and many voices can come in. But I also have always admired those novels that are singular and, an afternoon, one person, one moment. So I tried to do that in this one. So the main character's name is Tom Lowe Jr. He's 54 years old, and he's lost everything. He was a builder and a proud small business owner, had his own contracting business. Right around 2008, he made the mistake of signing an adjustable rate loan, and then the interest rates kicked up and up and up, and he's working hard and hard and hard to get it done. He falls off a roof, gets really hurt, gets addicted to painkillers. His house gets repossessed. He loses his house. His wife leaves him. He's estranged from his son. Oh, and he's also in chronic pain. And in the opening chapters, his car has been repossessed or towed away because he didn't have his registration up to date. And that's how this cheerful little novel begins. But in the opening scene, which I'm not going to read from, we see him with a 27-year-old young woman who, he's 54, she's 27. He lives in subsidized housing, Section 8 housing, which he calls the 8. And she's got 3 kids from 3 different boys. And they, with another boy, are trying to steal the trash of the banker who talked Tom Lowe into signing the loan. He's trying to steal his trash to find credit card information to steal from the banker who stole from him. That's how it begins. And I'm going to read you just a few minutes from chapter 3. And I'd like to dedicate this brief reading to my lovely Aunt Catherine, who has lived here all her long, beautiful life, my father's sister, Aunt Catherine. I have spent many hours contemplating pain. Its constant presence seems like such a dark joke, really. Like the school bully who sits on your chest and spits in your face years after both of you have moved on. My pelvis and hips were fractured years ago. Do they have to keep spitting in my face? It's close to 9, and I lie on plywood over the cushions of my couch in the 8. On the floor near my feet is the Andrews household's unopened trash bag. From here, I can see through the thin plastic the outlines of commercial-sized envelopes, a sheaf of papers, and what looks like a pencil. On the other side of the wall, there's only quiet, no yelling, no barely muffled video games, no sex. All day and night, I hear through its concrete walls the muffled sounds of bad behavior. Trina yells at her babies. She calls them names. She swears at them. Sometimes her boyfriend Brian will be there, and he yells and swears at them all. Some got their units here in the 8 by lottery, others because their family names were on the list for generations. I got mine through my former brother-in-law, Gerard, who was a boy when I married his older sister, a man who is now a lawyer and who, in an act of pity, secured me my own unit here in the 8. My neighbor Fitz drives a new Mustang. It's red with tinted windows, and when the inspectors come to check in on us, he hides it out behind the dumpsters filled with wet diapers and cigarette butts, with old TV sets and eggshells and used condoms, with plastic toys and empty bottles of wine. Fitz only pays me 75% the value of my EBT card. It's what I have to do so that I can buy the liquid pain distractor that keeps me from falling back to the O's, that and toilet paper, which I'm not allowed to put on my EBT card. After Fitz is cut, I'm left with only $100.38 for the month, and now Drew's birthday is in less than a week, though I have never stopped thinking of my son, ever. In the unit across the dirt yard from Trina's lives a young couple. He's black and she's white, and if I add their two ages together, I've still been on this earth 10 years longer. The woman's name starts with an A, Amber or Ashley, and she must have gotten pregnant in high school, and now they have 3 brown babies, all under the age of 6. Those kids are always dressed in clean clothes, their hair and faces washed. 2 boys and a girl. Their mother doesn't let play with Trina's kids, who are not clean and who do not wear clean clothes. Trina's little one, Cody, 5 years old, looked at me one summer afternoon as I rose slowly from my Taurus, and he opened his little mouth and yelled, "Fucka." I grew up with kids like that. In the next unit over lives an old woman. I believe she's close to 100. Every afternoon, a visiting nurse shows up in her blue Corolla. She spends an hour in there, then leaves. On Sundays, the old woman's son picks her up for church in his sedan. Its rear passenger door is covered by white letters in cursive, Bon Giovanni Shoe Repair. He's a big man like me, though he has 20 years on me and is clean-shaven, his bald head covered with a scally cap he takes off before stepping into his mother's unit. For the 1000th time, I think that I do not belong here. I do not belong here with any of these people. In just a few days, my son will turn 20, but how am I going to get to his campus 100 miles west? All because I drove Trina to the lab to sell her plasma to make rent. It's something I do every week, but this time a young cop in his parked cruiser took note of the expired decal on my rear plate, and now, sitting on the plank over 2 stacks of books I call a coffee table, are the 3 crumpled fines that may as well be loaded guns pointed at my head. One is for $607 for driving an unregistered vehicle. Another is for $530 for driving an uninsured vehicle. And the third, because I left my empty wallet back in my unit, is $500 for driving without a license. The tally pushes hotly through my head. $1,637, and this doesn't even include the cost of towing and storing my Taurus, the only thing that ever gets me away from here. Usually at sundown, I drive out to Cape Ann to see what used to be my home. I leave the 8 in this neighborhood of box houses like the one I grew up in, the vans and pickup trucks in their driveways, the strip plaza across the street with a liquor store and a salon called Dawn's Hair and Nails. I accelerate east for the highway overpass, a McDonald's on the other side, then a Napa auto store next to a home for old people. The front lawn just a strip of grass between the sidewalk and a parking lot that was always full. I think of my mother then, of the early dementia that has claimed her, of how I should visit her, but not till I'm back on my feet. A pathetic phrase, really, given how much pain I have to endure when I stand. Sometimes I turn onto the entrance ramp of the highway. I join the traffic of my fellow human beings and feel for a few miles anyway part of them again. A man coming home after a long day's work. A man who had every intention of carrying his own weight. I glance to my right and left, see women and men behind their wheels, some talking into their phones or driving quiet, their eyes on the road, on the spouses waiting for them at home, maybe the hot meals, the happy kids. But other times I stay on the back roads all the way to Cape Ann. It takes longer that way. I drive east past the gas station and sub shop, the movie theater and franchise restaurant with its Italian name and dim sconces. I pass the lawn and garden center, mulch piled in its lot in the summer, cords of split hardwood there in the winter. And how many times had I loaded my van with wood just like that? Then I and Drew, 7, 8, carried each log up to our rear porch where we'd stack it. And Drew would be in his wool Patriots cap, down coat, and gloves, all of which his dad had been able to buy him. Soon I'm driving south through the salt marshes, thick stands of pines and birch between it and the grounds of Trevor's Academy. Driving by, I look out at its baseball diamond and lacrosse and soccer fields, the brick buildings of its campus built 100 years before the war between the states. It's where my Ronnie was raised by her historian father and her mathematician mother, 2 people I can't deny still loving but also resenting, For while they did not make a materialist out of their daughter, they did raise an elitist, one I could never keep up with. No, that isn't fair, really. She's no elitist, she's an abundist. It's a word I made up, meaning one accustomed to abundance. She spent her girlhood in a brick house filled with books and the savory smells of her father's homemade soups and stews, her mother's ginger cookies and English teas. At night, when she was young, they took turns reading to her until she fell asleep under thick blankets in a room decorated with framed paintings of landscapes and horses and the moon and stars she went on to study at Smith. From when she was a young girl, she and her little brother Gerard had eaten most of their meals in the Academy's dining hall with high school students who came from rich families up and down the East Coast, well-dressed teenagers who treated her and her little brother like their brilliant and adorable mascots. So that years later, when I first saw her at a house party off the UMass Amherst campus, there in the kitchen doorway stood a young woman with a long brown hair spilling out of a cloche hat, an expectant joy in her pretty face. That here was yet another room full of people who would like her just for being among them. No arrogance, just a deeply affirming relationship to the world I'd never witnessed or even considered possible. And then I was stepping toward her, a bottle of beer in each hand, her face turning toward mine with a question in her eyes, and I sure as hell hoped I had a good answer. Thank you. So how are you? I'm from Boston. So this book came, this story came from my fears and my demons and my life and not my life. I guess it's two parts. And, you know, some of my writers who were in my class yesterday, we were talking about creative writing as a free fall into your psyche, and it's scary in there. And so something weird happened when I was 31 years old, and it has to do with employment. Early in my writing, I started writing. I was lucky enough to find it at age 23 or 4, and I made the semi-conscious decision I didn't want to get a real job. I'd gone to college, but I thought if I got a real job, as in a job that made money, maybe made your mother proud at Thanksgiving to tell you what you did for work, maybe bought you a house and maybe even a car. I was afraid if I got one of those jobs, I'd stop writing. So I cleaned houses. I mean, really well. Toothbrushes to toilets. Took pride in my toilet cleaning. I worked in halfway houses and group homes for depressed teenagers and inmates. Mainly, well, I enjoyed working with people, but also because I liked to write in the mornings and there were night jobs. I was a bartender for 10 years. And I was a self-employed carpenter for most of my 30s, while also being a member of the Migrant Farm Workers of Academia, an adjunct writing professor, teaching at 4 or 5 campuses while remodeling bathrooms and kitchens and roofing jobs. And but I hadn't started teaching yet. I was now 31, and my first book, a collection of stories that came out in 1989, came out, and the head of the writing program at Emerson College called me and said, "Hey, you want to teach a class?" I'd never taken a writing class. I didn't get an MFA. I didn't know how to teach, but I said, "Hey, beats roofing in the winter. I'll teach that class." So I find myself sitting in front of like 20, 18-year-olds, you know, "So, hey guys, what are you working on?" And except for one incredibly, insanely productive 19-year-old young woman with 5 fantasy novels already in the drawer, nobody was working on something, so I had to get them started, and thus began my teaching life. And about 2 weeks later, I got my paycheck. And I made much more money as a self-employed carpenter, but it was nice to get a check. And something felt so strange about it that I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I did. I got paid, and I never broke into a sweat. It's the first job I'd ever worked where I didn't sweat, where I wasn't actually, you know, breaking into a sweat 6 or 7 times a shift, just for sitting around and talking. So that's really kind of part one. Part two is I grew up a member of the educated working poor. And you don't have to have written anything I've read anything I've written, but in my memoir, TOWNIE, I write about this. So my dad was a beautiful short story writer, a master short story writer, but he didn't make much money as a teacher, as a professor. My mom was working in social services. She never made more than 11 or 12,000 a year, 4 kids, rent, all that. And so I grew up with a mom, and they divorced after about 9 or 10 years. Now, my dad was not a deadbeat dad. He paid his child support, but it wasn't enough. And my mother never made enough either. So I watched this woman. She's either going to pay the rent on time or we're going to have heat, but never at the same time. If we're going to have enough oil in the burner for the heat, then the landlord's going to be knocking on the door again looking for the late rent. She's either going to put gas in the car to go to work in Boston or get groceries, not at the same time. On and on. And so, you know, my 3 siblings and I grew up watching that and living that, and it's never left me. My wife, Fontaine, of 35 years, and our 3 kids, we've had an abundant life. And, but I have never stopped feeling poor, and I've never stopped identifying with those with nothing. And I've never stopped feeling as if it could be taken away just like that. And so that's where Tom Lowe came from. I imagine, well, what if my writing life, so my 3rd book, which was probably the 6th I'd written, took off, and then it got Oprah-fied, and it really took off, and maybe an 18-year overnight success. And now we are comfortable, and I was able to build my house with my bare hands with my brother, and it's been a beautiful, privileged life. But I began to wonder, what if my writing life never took off? What if I never became a full-time professor? What if I still was a self-employed carpenter and I'm in my 60s now, and when you wake up at this age and older, everything hurts for hours, you keep moving? And what if I got hurt? And what if I had a mortgage? And what if I still had kids to educate and take care of? And that's where Tom Lowe came from. And despite the very depressing beginning, it's my most hopeful book, they say. Just so that I tell you that. Anyway, that's it. What do you want to talk about? Anything? I'll call on people. Yeah, what's your name?
Sherry.
All right.
Your family is so prolific. Your father, James Fair, Elizabeth Neal.
Delaney, her daughter, yeah.
Do you think, is that just from tradition in the family?
You know,
Where do you think that comes
I don't know. We've all talked about this as a family off and on. You know, and my 2 sons, Austin and Elias, they're 30 and 26. They're both really talented writers. I mean, that's what they're going to do with their lives. My daughter in the middle is getting a PhD in feminist philosophy, I should say. I don't know, Sherry. You know, it's got to be something genetic, right? There's got to be a bit of a nature-nurture thing going on. I mean, I think, you know, like you think of the Wyeth families, you know, and the Bach families. I mean, certainly those kids must have had paintings and music in their lives, and certainly, you know, I own 18,000 books. I grew up in a house full of books. My mom couldn't afford the rent, but you know, we had books. And I think it's a combination of nature and nurture, but I think a lot of it's nature. I think it's just, you know, some kids are born into families that are really good at math and engineering, and other kids are born into families that are really good at drawing. And I do know that it was, you know, so it hasn't, for the first 20 years of my writing life, it was no fun being André III, man. I'm like Hank Jr. of American Lit. And I've said to my dad, her brother, who, you know, we lost 24 and a half years ago, I said, you know, old man, I've read every single one of your short stories, all 90 whatever of them. I noticed not one character's name repeats itself, and yet you have your first son, you couldn't come up with a new damn name. And so, but I'm honored to have it now, and why am I bringing that up? I just lost my train of thought, Sherry. Family. Oh, yes. So many, you know, for the first few years of my life, you know, people were constantly asking about the old man and his influence, and I would get angry. So what do you mean? I didn't even live with him after age 9 or 10. I lived with my mother. Why don't you talk about my mother who was there? But here's where I'm full of it. He was a huge influence. I do love his work, and I teach it now to my students. But he was an influence in this way. When I was a little kid, when we were little kids, and we always lived in tiny little rental houses, moved a lot, we would have to, I'd see a grown man go into a room, shut the door, and we all had to be quiet or play outside because Daddy was writing. And, I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood, so I'd say to my best friend, Warren Clay, hey, so what time of day does your dad do the writing? Huh? Wiring? My old man's a plumber. He's not an electrician. And so I thought everybody's dad wrote. And so years later, so now, I'm older, and I find myself teaching conferences, and I teach these wonderful human beings who've been, living their lives, and it's, once they retire, they're going to write their novel. Once they get divorced, they're going to write their novel. Once they, and I had a student who was 86 years old, beautiful writer, Helen. And she was writing a gorgeous novel, and she'd only started writing like 2 years earlier. I said, Helen, why'd you wait so long? Oh, I had to wait for my parents to die, honey. I said, why? Because they didn't want me to be a starving artist. They didn't want me to suffer. She had a thick Boston accent. And she said, but they've been dead for 30 years, and it got worse because I knew their ghosts were going to watch me write. So I just started writing. She started writing. She published it at age 88. I didn't have that problem. And my siblings didn't either. So when I found myself pulled towards creative writing in my early 20s, it felt as valid and legitimate a direction to take in life as law school or medical school or business school for some other kid. Because I had the example of my old man trying to, go into a room, shut the door, and make something beautiful for someone he'll never meet. So he was a huge influence in that way. And I think it's primary.
He's probably the best short story.
Oh, yeah. He is considered one of the finest short story writers ever to write in the form, and I'm really proud of that about him. Yeah. Who else? What else? How are you? Hey, what's your name?
Dennis.
Hey, Dennis.
Other than your father, what are some authors that you admire?
God, so many. So Dennis asked, other than my old man, who are some writers I admire? I love Hemingway's short stories. And what's sad about Hemingway is, and this is, not an original thought, but his dedication to his myth in promoting tough guy has really overshadowed his work. And if you read his work, there's no swinging, swaggering machismo. It's full of pain and vulnerability and death and, frankly, sensitivity. I love his short stories. I think my favorite contemporary short story writer right now is Elizabeth Strout. Do you guys know her work? Have you not read? So, My Name is Olive Kitteridge won the Pulitzer Prize. I think my favorite book of hers is My Name is Lucy Barton. I can't get over that. I can't get over that book. I think it's one of the most psychically naked books I've ever read. And nothing happens. This middle-aged lady has a mysterious illness. She's in a New York hospital. Her mother comes to visit, and that's it. And you can't put it down. I also, too, Dennis, for me, and I bet this is true of a lot of writers, I think my influences are more music than actual literature, as much as I read. I had 15 Dylan albums before I was 16, and the reason I loved Dylan was his lyrics. And I'm one of the few who didn't get ticked off they'd won the Nobel Prize for Literature. My poet friends are understandably ticked off, but because there's so many obscure poets, and why give it to a man who's already world famous? But I read poetry every day, and I have for 40 years. And before I write, and so I'm a really well-read guy of poetry. I don't write it though. I'm going to recite you one. Can I recite you one? From one of my favorite poets, Jane Kenyon, who died young of leukemia, but she left behind 5 beautiful books. This one's called Looking at the Stars. It is not the dry God that will save us, the God of curved space, but the sun whose blood spattered the hem of his mother's robe. That's why I read poetry, man. How can you not want to write after reading that? Thank you, Dennis. I also love so many. I love Ironweed by William Kennedy. Here's what I don't love. I love books that are compassionate. You can feel the writer not judging the characters and just trying to evoke and excavate their experience. I don't like writing that is showy and has more words than are necessary, and I won't name names, but I like compassionate fiction. And Elizabeth Strout is one of the kings of that. Also Richard Russo. Who else? What else? Hi, Dee.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. I was in the class yesterday, and of course I'm here today. And I want to know, where did you get your memory? Because you pull so many things out. Like, you just read that poem. You weren't planning, I don't think.
No, I wasn't. Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I don't know, but so Dee asked, where's your memory come from? Because, so yesterday in class, I don't know, all these quotes from other writers come out. My wife said to me once, honey, you have no wisdom of your own, just like a Rolodex of other people's wisdom. I said, that's called attribution, darling. I go to a talk and I hear somebody spout something. Tolstoy said that, you didn't say that. Anyway. I don't know, Dee, but the truth is I have a terrible memory in another way. So, last summer I was watching some crime thriller and my son Elias was visiting and I said, hey, buddy, come watch this with me. This is a good movie. Dad, we saw it last spring. Huh? We saw it 5 months ago. No, we didn't. I've never seen it. Dad, we saw the whole thing together. So I'll forget a whole damn movie, but I can read. I don't know. I see words and I remember words. And I also remember things that I find helpful to me and hopefully to other people. But thanks. I like words. Who else? What else? What's your name?
Vicki,
Hi, Vicki.
may I ask about one of your earlier books?
You may.
Okay, House of Sand and Fog. When that came out, was that about 15 years ago or more?
God, I think that was over 20.
A while back.
1999.
Okay. Well, it was after it was made into a movie. I'm referring to the movie. I read the book, but after I saw the movie. But I teach English as a second language to adults, and at that time, I had a lot of students from Iran. And one of my students brought me her own copy of the movie, and she said, please watch this.
Oh, wow.
And her English was very good, but it wasn't to the level that she could really handle a novel. But she said, he's the first person who understands why we're talking about.
Oh, wow.
And so my question with that, I'm not just saying that to flatter you, but
Well, no, that's,
the question is,
yeah.
that's such a completely different culture, and the main character, the man in the story, well, also the other people too, but did you do a lot of research? Or
No.
How did you get
I'll tell you. So Vicki, right? Vicki? So Vicki's asking about my novel, House of Sand and Fog. It came out in 1999, and the main character is an Iranian retired colonel who is, when the novel opens, he's working on a road gang. He used to be like John McCain in his country, and now he's nobody in this country. And he's working manual labor with uneducated people, and it's killing him. Here's my research. So Vicki asked, did I do a lot of research? And she said some nice things about the Iranian depiction, working with Iranian students in ESL teaching. I fell in love with an Iranian in college. And I was 18, she was 19, small little college up in New England where my old man taught. And I'd never even heard of Iran. And I couldn't breathe around her. And after about 18, and I quickly discovered you can't date a Shiite Muslim girl from the upper classes of Iran the way I used to date in the mill town where I grew up, which is, hey, Vicki, I stole a six-pack when I go sit in the parking lot and drink it. That's my No, I had to date the entire family. So her mother had an apartment very close to campus. And why was she there? She was there to chaperone her two daughters, not the son, and she was there to protect their virginity. That's the only reason she was yards away from the campus. So the only way I could date this woman was to go to the apartment. And I fell in love with the whole family. And I fell in love with the culture. And, I started to learn baby talk Farsi. I learned how to say I love you, mandu setaram, bir, abajo. I learned all sorts of things. And the old man wasn't there. He was in Europe. And I knew he'd been a colonel in the Shah's Air Force. And one day I'm there, and we're sitting at the sofre, which is this carpet on the floor with all these beautiful Persian dishes. And they're all speaking Farsi, and I'm picking up a little bit, I'm learning. And there's a photo on the wall I'd never seen before, and it's of the Shah of Iran with some bald guy. And I said, hey, that's the Shah, to my girlfriend. She said, yes, André, I know it's, yeah, oh yeah. Who's that with him? Oh, that's Baba. Baba's Persian for dad. Your dad knows the Shah of Iran? Oh, he's worked very closely with him, and he's coming here next month, and he can't wait to meet you. Shit! Are you kidding? So I grew up in these blue-collar neighborhoods where for years I carried this notion that a strong man a powerful man is a physically strong man. 300-pound bench press, knockout punch, that's power. Until I met real power. So the colonel comes. He maybe weighs 140 pounds. He might be 5'7", but he carried himself with such bearing, and he spoke like this, like a man accustomed to being listened to by everyone at all times. And he scared the hell out of me. But I began to really respect him because he was really a devoted dad. He seemed to be a loving husband. And I watched this man who was very powerful in Iran. I watched him work at a shoe factory across the river, stamping shoe soles. During the day and at night, he worked at a convenience store behind the register. And why is he working 16 hours a day? He's trying to not get into the last bit of money they have left. And on the rare days he can get it off, he puts on his best suit, and he goes looking for work as an aeronautical engineer, which is what his training was. He never got to work, never got any good luck. And I remember one night I was at the apartment helping my girlfriend's younger sister type a paper, and my girlfriend said, can you help my dad bring in the groceries? Because his wife was very depressed and spoke no English, so he would also go grocery shopping between shifts. So I'm in the elevator with the colonel, and all the grocery bags around his feet, and he's probably only in his late 50s, but he seemed ancient to me at 19, and he looked very tired. And he said to me in his thick Persian accent, André, I used to work with kings and queens, presidents, vice presidents, prime ministers of entire countries by myself. Now I serve candy and cigarettes to kids who don't even know who I am. So I never thought this would happen to me, and I could not forget it. 15 years later, much to my surprise, I'm writing and publishing fiction. I read an article in the local newspaper, the Boston Globe, about a woman in California whose house, she gets evicted from her house for taxes she thought, the county thought she owed, she did not owe. Bureaucratic error, they repossess it, sell it off, and the man who buys it is Middle Eastern. And I immediately, and he's under no legal pressure to sell the house back because it's not his fault that they sold the wrong house. And I immediately saw my colonel in that elevator, and that's how the novel began. But by then, I was fluent in Farsi. I could speak it. You know, Salam, and André hastam, memichamato harf bezanam, abajo meldiri. Hi, how are you? I want to talk. You want a beer? By the way, when I speak Persian around Persian people, they look at me and say, so, CIA? No, I fell in love with one of you people. What's the matter with you? That's how it started, but very little research on the Persian, strangely. Thank you. Long story. Yes, my lovely Aunt Catherine.
Do you think writing runs in families like other talents maybe? You know, we have you, Jimmy, out there.
Your sister, Delaney. Yeah, and now my sons. Yeah, so Catherine's asking, do I think that writing runs in the family? You know, we have so many in our family. If you haven't, you know, my first cousin once removed is James Lee Burke, the wonderful crime writer. So much of his work is set here in Louisiana. Yeah, I think it does. Catherine, I do think it's more nature than nurture. I really do. I think it's something's just in the blood. I'm so grateful I found it when I found it. I kind of rejected it. And I'm glad I didn't anymore. Who else? Have I taken enough of your time? Anita, what's on your mind over there? You don't have to talk. I'm just saying hi. Sandy, and then lady over there, yeah. I mean, Dee.
Clearly a lot of what you've written has autobiographical elements to it. Where do you fall on the concept of write what you know or don't write?
I'm so glad you're asking that. And also, it ties into the earlier comment Vicki had made about House of Sand and Fog and the Colonel. So, you know, Dee's question was, you know, it's Sarah Orne Jewett who said, write what you know. And that's really good advice. You know, especially for younger writers, you think, well, I just grew up a dentist's daughter in a cul-de-sac. What do I have to write about? Everything. By the time you're 10, you know everything about exaltation, betrayal, or hurt feelings, you know, on and on. I mean, you're a human being. The imagination is wide and deep. But you don't want to stray too far from your emotional center. You want to write about things you care about. There's a wonderful line from Willa Cather. I'm going to lay one on you. A writer is at her best only when writing within the character and range of her deepest sympathies. It means write what you care about. But how do you know what you care about until you start writing? And I've had these experiences, you know, we talked about the importance of being willing to fail in your work, where I've written, you know, in a lot of words and realized I don't really care about this subject as much as I thought I did. And so I have to put it aside. Write about something you care about. And what's one real metric for weighing that? Check in with what you're curious about, which we talked about yesterday. What draws you? What are you curious about? But E.L. Doctorow said, well, it's all well and good to write what you know, but how the hell you know? He said, but how do you know what you know? Right? So, you know, I was drawn to that idea for that novel, House, Sand, and Fog, because I knew an Iranian colonel who used to be powerful and now he wasn't. So I began to write from his point of view. I don't think I could publish that book now. That book's in 30 countries. I don't think I could publish it now. Why? Because I'm a white male. And what this horse crap about staying in your lane, they wouldn't publish. How can you write from the point of view of an Iranian? You're a white kid from mill towns of Massachusetts. I say, because that's my job. You know, I get so upset about this notion that we can't write from the point of view of anyone who shows up. I do want to say something, though. I am a heterosexual, college-educated white male. There's not a more privileged human being on the planet Earth. Doors open for me just because of my skin color and my gender. I have privileges I did not earn. I just inherited because we're in a racist patriarchy. So I toast and applaud the rage that has brought the gavel down on. Sherman Alexie back in the 90s said, okay, great white man. And I think he was talking about Jim Harrison, who had written from the point of view of an Oglala Sioux woman. So you're going to come to our country, you're going to rape and kill us all, commit genocide, put us on third world poverty-stricken reservations, make us a bunch of alcoholics, and now you're going to take our stories? F you. I totally get the rage. But the wonderful writer Rose Ellen Brown had an essay years ago. She said the rage is understandable, but the corrective measure is not right. She said, when I'm trying to write from the point of view of the other, maybe someone with a skin color different from mine, or a gender different from mine, or ethnicity different from mine, it's not an act of colonialism or imperialism or racism. It's an act of friendship where I'm asking, what's it like to be you? Now, the risk is I'll get it horribly wrong, I'll fall flat on my face, and everybody can tell me, which happened to Janine Cummins with American Dirt. But I feel so passionately every writer who goes to his or her or their private space to write words should have no restrictions of any kind.
Amen.
Yeah, that's my thought. Anita. Oh, and then I'm going to call on this lady. Can I call on her first? Go ahead, because you raised your hand. What's your name?
Pamela.
Hi, Pamela.
I always read 2 books at a time.
Oh, you're one of those people.
Yeah.
Like 2 novels at a time? Like you'll read 2 novels at a time, or like a nonfiction and a fiction? Well, God bless you. At least you're reading. That's great.
Well, we watch 2 TV shows.
Yeah.
Anyway, recently, a friend told me she could never read a book by an author that writes a book a year. My upstairs book right now is one of those authors. My downstairs book is a
It's a great question. I've never been, I love that your friend's such a snob. I love her. So you hear what Pamela said? So Pamela reads 2 books at a time, one upstairs, one downstairs. Her upstairs book now is by a writer who writes like a book a year. Downstairs book, takes years at a time. Hey man, I just love to see people read. I don't care if it's crap. And I'm not saying those who write a book a year write crap, because I have some very prolific cousins who do not write crap. I've got, Stephen King's, I was telling this story about Stephen King. He's an acquaintance of mine, and a few years ago, I was writing him an email trying to get him to do a literary fundraiser in Boston, and we've known each other for years, and I had just finished a novel, and it takes me 3 to 5 years every book. And this one took 5.5 years, and I said, oh, by the way, Steve, I just finished this novel. It's over 800 pages long, took me 5.5 years. He writes back, hey, Andre, I too have an 800-page manuscript on my desk, but it took me 3 months, not 5 years. Love, Steve. I write back, F you. He's very generous and sweet, though. No, Pamela, look, some people can write really well and fast, like Joyce Carol Oates. So I'd say, I'll read any damn book. I will. And I love anybody who reads anything, especially in this age where people are staring at screens and wasting their lives. Hi, Anita, what's on your mind? Are you talking about revision or starting a new work? Yeah, that's a great question. Did you hear Anita's question? So you finish a book, a long project, and then you're starting a new one. Do you do it right away? What's it like? Earlier in my writing life, I made the mistake of starting something too soon. I would get the idea on Tuesday, and I'd start writing on Thursday, and then it would collapse by Saturday. My father, my Aunt Catherine's brother, the great short story master, André Dubus, he had this wonderful expression. He said, I need to have a story gestate for a few months. Like pregnancy itself, like the sperm and egg come together, you get the idea, and then you gotta let it sit a little bit. And in his case, and I've discovered that this is kind of true for me too, he said, then I only start writing when I can see the first 2 scenes. I start writing, Anita, when I can see the first sliver of an image. I don't need any scene at all. And so for me, with this novel, Such Kindness, I saw, so again, it came from my own fears and my own questions. What if I was still a working carpenter? What if I got hurt and with all the responsibilities I have? And I began to see a man lying on a piece of plywood, a sheet of plywood over a couch in Section 8 housing. And he was surrounded by college textbooks because he went to a bunch of colleges because I know a bunch of guys who work in the trades who've taken all kinds of college courses. And so once I had the image, once I see the image, then I start writing. And it's almost always an image. I don't hear anything. I see it. Faulkner would hear voices, but I just see stuff. And it's so much fun. I mean, it's so much, I've been writing for all my adult life, which is a long time now, and I've lost no enthusiasm. I did it this morning when I had no time in the hotel, but I could not do it. I recommend it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Anita talked about when you start writing, do you write a lot of stuff that you throw away? And the answer is yes, yes, and more yes. We talked yesterday in the class. I said, open the doors, find the story, go deeper, ask questions of the character. What is she feeling, thinking, doing, wanting? And I'll write, all right, so my novel, The Garden of the Last Days, was 880 pages. By the time I was done revising it, and also with my editor's help, I'd cut 6 characters, and now it was 14 characters, 14 different voices. Now it's 8 characters. I cut 250 pages and 6 characters. So it's just, the writer Paul Engle has a great line, writing is rewriting what you've already rewritten.
Which is a great segue. I wanted to know about your process of revision and how you determine what your novel needs, for lack of a better term, to be better.
So Sandy asked, and I feel like I'm taking too much of your time, and we can stop in a bit, but Sandy asked, what is the revision process? We talked about this yesterday. I think I've got a friend who's such an oddball, but she's a wonderful novelist. She writes a book, Pamela, every 10 years we see a book by her, and they're always celebrated. So I think it's very important you finish your book, your novel, and you put it in a drawer for 1 year, like 12 months, which is hard when you're a working writer who gets deadlines and advances and, they want the book. But, and that's been my case for a few years. So in my case, it's 6 months. But I do 6 months, and I work on a short story or an essay. And what my friend does is she puts it aside for a year, and then she picks it up, takes a manuscript, she puts on clothes she would never normally wear, like some outfit she never wears, some hat she's never put on her head. She'll pour herself an alcoholic beverage that she never drinks, like maybe sherry. Then she'll go to a part of her house where she never goes and sit in a chair she never sits in. She literally tries to become someone else, the reader, someone she's never met, and then she reads the novel and makes all the corrections. For me, though, Sandy, to me, it's always about how can this be more itself. And I try not to think too much of the reader when I'm writing. I try to think about, is this a decent sentence? But I do believe that if there's any one enemy to creativity, it's self-consciousness. There's a wonderful line from the Nadine Gordimer novel, the great South African writer, where one character has an insight as to what sincerity is. She said, oh, sincerity is never having an idea of oneself, right? You're not looking in the mirror to see how you're doing. And right now, we're all in such a toxically self-conscious state because of social media. Everybody's the curator of the museum of me. It's made everyone self-involved and neurotic. But I think it's very important when you're writing to not think too much about who's going to read it or who's going to like it or not. Just be the characters. But in the revision, Sandy, I'm thinking a lot about, do I need to drag the reader through 3 pages of this, or can I do it in a sentence? Do I need to drag the reader through 3 bad cocktail dinners, or can I do it in 1? And that's when I do all the shaping, the plotting. Page 300 is now page 1. The first 200 pages are gone. But that was 2 years of my life. Tough shit. It's not about you. Cut it. And so you have to be merciless. Should I take one more, you lovely people? All right. Yeah? Okay. I need to quote Lao Tzu. I quoted him yesterday in my class. I love this. He was the founder of Taoism. Soften the light. Become one with the dusty world. Peace and love. Thank you.